I'm not sure it's necessarily as weak as we once thought it may be.
I don't know. It's tough.
It's just a different class to me. I think
it's a different class, and you're betting on a lot of outliers.
Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Tuesday, April the 18th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We are also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I am joined, as always, by producer JT. JT, how are you? Fresh haircut, looking good, my man.
I know. I'm no longer Stony Keeley light. I was following in his footsteps for about 6 months here, but goodbye. Now we have a little bit of matching hair going on, you know.
Sure.
Similar haircuts, but
yeah, we don't have to confuse you and Stony Keeley in any future recordings.
Yeah, that might be hard.
It might be. Well, if you're standing side by side, I think Stoney's going to have you beat in terms of size, so maybe that part won't be as confusing.
That's what I meant. That was a little bit of satire.
Yeah. So today we've got an awesome topic. We are finally, and I know folks that have been listening to this show, following along every positional episode. Okay, the cornerbacks, or sorry, we haven't gotten to the cornerbacks yet. Those are coming this week. The safeties, the linebackers, the defensive linemen, the edge. All right, okay, cool. We're cool. We like that. It's interesting. But, I'm a Titans fan. I'm looking for the positions that we want in this draft. Well, baby, we're here. It's the receivers. This is the one that Titans fans have been waiting for, maybe above all of the other ones. And we've got an awesome guest for it. He's Austin Gayle from The Ringer, previously of PFF. We had him on the show to talk draft about a year ago. You and I got to meet up with him in Indianapolis one night and hang out, which was awesome. And we were like, hey, we got to have you on the show for another draft episode. And we decided, what better than to talk about this receiver class, which is a tricky one, kind of an interesting one. Maybe not the best class in the world, maybe a very different class than what we're accustomed to seeing. But the Titans have got to find a guy, or preferably two, in this class to take home. And we're, of course, also we're a draft show, right? We want to talk about the guys in this draft, and there are quite a few receivers of intrigue that we need to discuss. And so we brought in Austin and had an awesome conversation about that. If you're watching on YouTube today, first of all, thank you. And if you're listening on the podcast version, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate you. But just so you know, there's a YouTube version of this show, a video format that is very nice and pretty and nice to look at. You're going to enjoy it a lot better, the visual and audio experience. So I encourage you, go over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. Okay, you're going to find this show, and you can watch the entire thing that you're listening to. And it's a nice change of pace. We get a lot of cool graphics, and you get to see our pretty faces and our pretty show design and all of these things that really enhance the experience. So go and do that. But if you're doing that today, I have to warn you, Austin, he's a busy man, right? He's a national analyst this time of year. It's busy for him. So we're lucky to even have him on. We appreciate truly his time. He gave us more than I even expected. We got 45 minutes done with him and got through the entire top 10. So we got all of the precious information from him that we were looking for. But we had to cut out some of the stuff that we were including in previous positional episodes. And if we're doing an hour and a half on linebackers and safeties, talking about the numbers, the measurables, their college performance by the numbers, we can't shortchange you, our dear and precious viewers, that vital information for you to be able to go and make your own decision. Because ultimately, half the fun of draft season is differing in opinion on guys, having your guys that you're high on, your guys that you're low on, forming an opinion for yourself and not just echoing all of the things that you hear Mel Kiper say on ESPN once we roll around to the actual draft, right? So in order to do that, we are having to record a little bit of a second show that we're going to shuffle in with the clips that we got with Austin. So if you're watching, there's going to be kind of a back and forth between just JT and I going through some of the numbers and our own opinion on these receivers, and then talking to Austin about his opinion on these receivers and having a discourse there. So it might be a little bit funky in that way, but I promise it's the best possible product. And with that, JT, how about we just go ahead and jump into our conversation with Austin and the top 10 wide receivers in the 2023 NFL Draft. All right, we are live and getting ready to go as people pile in here, joined by Austin Gayle of The Ringer. Austin, thank you for joining us, my man. Last time we had you on about a year ago, you were with a different company, and now you're with another company, both of which we quite enjoy around here. So we appreciate you joining us. How are you, man?
Doing good. Last time I saw you guys, Combine, right? We saw you.
That's right. Yeah, we hung out one night at the Combine.
Yeah, that was a good time.
It was a good time, and we're talking receivers today, which should be another good time because that's always an exciting topic during the draft season this year. Kind of a different class than we've seen in the past couple of years, maybe a little bit of a treasure hunt if you're looking for the right guy. So I think it just makes it more of a challenge, really, trying to find the talent here or there. And as we go, I feel like this is the case with every skill position. As we go through the draft season, you get at the beginning like, well, this wide receiver class is not anything compared to the last couple of classes. And then whether it is or not, we delude ourselves by the end into thinking that there's a lot of really great talent. That maybe there is. I'm sure that there is somewhere, right? Somebody's going to be a stud in this class. It's just a matter of who and where. So we're doing our top 10 wide receivers in this class. We'll go through both your and my lists. You've got your top 10 ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. So let's start. We can start at the bottom here. Were there any guys that didn't quite make your top 10 that you would just be remiss without mentioning? Anybody that you're just like, oh, this guy is a day 3 guy, but I really like the upside?
It's tough, right? I had a bucket of these guys that probably are day 3 types right outside my top 10, but you could argue fit into the top 10. A.T. Perry, Wake Forest, I had here at 11. I like him a lot. I think that in a class of a lot of small guys, there's a world where I can see myself talking into him being a top 10, receiver in this class. I also really like Rashee Rice, and then there are some plays where I hate Rashee Rice. Yeah. Tyler Scott of Cincinnati, I know is someone I'm lower on than other people. I think that he's right outside my top 10. But I do really like him. Jonathan Mingo is someone who's outside my top 10, but I don't love him. I think that Mingo athletically is someone that people will covet, but on tape is not there yet for me. Someone I can't get my head around, Trey Palmer. I don't love Trey Palmer. I think Trey Palmer, his tape at Nebraska did not wow me the same way his athleticism wows me. I think Mingo and Palmer I view similarly. And then the two small guys with alliteration going, Trey Tucker, Darius Davis. It's like, okay, slot only types that have scheme touches. I'm fine taking these guys on day 3, but they probably can't fit into my top 10 either. That's like this bucket of all guys I've watched, all guys I've heard the hype around, but can't really get to seeing them as top 10 players in this class.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of guys. The one that you mentioned in particular, Mingo, he keeps climbing up and up a lot of boards, and I think it really is on paper. There's a lot to love there. It's just on tape. We've got a buddy who was an Ole Miss beat writer for the majority of his time there, and we asked him at the combine, like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on Mingo?" And he said he's great on paper, and then you watch the tape, and if you have watched Ole Miss at all, you don't want your team probably taking him because maybe he can't catch super well and is kind of up and down. The guys for me that I left off of my top 10, there's 3 that I love and 1 I really don't love. The one that is on a lot of people's boards that I just don't understand what the love is, and it sounds like he might be on yours since you didn't mention him, and I'm curious to see if we talk about him. It's Tank Dell out of Houston. I just don't. To me, he's not athletic enough to overcome the size shortcomings. And on tape, he didn't do anything that really wowed me. So he's kind of outside of my top 10. And then some of those guys that you mentioned, Rashee Rice is just outside of the 10 for me. Jayden Reed from Michigan State. I think there's a lot of things to like there. And if you're looking for somebody with a little bit of size, he could be a value add. Michael Wilson from Stanford. I think there's a lot on tape to like about him. I just don't know how much of a project he's going to be at the next level. So that with that being said, we've established the guys that just missed the cut. Let's get into our top 10 real quick. For those of you that are joining us live, if you have any comments, questions, go over to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube, and you can leave your comments and questions there in the chat. If you have anything you want to ask Austin, now is the time. So Austin, who is your 10th wide receiver?
10th, I had, let me go back to my list here. Number 10, I put Marvin Mims Jr. of Oklahoma. I like Marvin Mims. He's rose up in the process for me. Totally. I like the idea of all the guys I could kind of dial up scheme touches for. I think Mims Jr. does the most with it. I like his yards after the catch ability. I like how sure-handed he is. I like that he's played in multiple systems. I think he is someone that when you find other scouts or other people in your room in this theoretical green room talking all about him, I think there's so many reasons to draft him and not enough to not draft him. And I think that's why I see him as this maybe round 3 guy that maybe gets drafted up into round 2 because of positional value. And he's one that just edges out, Tank Dell for me. I didn't mention Tank Dell in this tier of receivers that I have, but Tank Dell I think is like, if not 11, he's 10B. I think the comp I gave for him and is a more polished Marquise Brown. I think you see some Marquise Brown in him, in that he's small, razor thin, probably should play in the slot, but still finds ways, like from a route running perspective, to get open and create separation. Tank Dell is like 10B right after Marvin Mims, because it's hard to bet on an outlier like Tank Dell, but I think Marquise Brown was overdrafted in terms of where he was positioned. And I think Tank Dell might be a day 2 type if he falls to day 3. You're working with a lot of good receiver things, like on tape things that you want your receiver to be. It's just getting past the weight and getting past, like, obviously the height outliers.
Yeah, at 5'11", 183. He's a relatively young guy, but the size is the biggest concern with him. I agree. He's risen up a lot of boards. And I feel like the draft community might be a little bit higher. The mock draft community might be a little bit higher on him than the NFL is. And I'm kind of wondering why that is. I don't know if you caught wind of on Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah last week. He said he keeps asking folks in the league that he has as sources, what are your thoughts on Mims? And he keeps just getting kind of shrugs, and he feels like he's taking crazy pills. I kind of feel the same way. If this guy falls into day 3, I will be shocked. If he falls really far into day 2, I'll be kind of surprised. There's a lot on tape that I really liked about him. It really just is that size concern. But yeah, he's got decent contested catch numbers despite the size shortcomings. Not a really significant drop issue in college by any means, was effective in the red zone. So I liked him a good bit. On my board, he was my 9th guy. JT, if you wouldn't mind taking us through some of the numbers that Marvin Mims put up at his combine and pro day, his mock draftable, what are we looking at here?
So yeah, he's of course on the shorter side, as it is with all these other guys. He's 5'11" and a quarter, which is 27th percentile. Very slim guy at 183 pounds. That's the 11th percentile.
It's going to be a common
wide
theme
receivers. Today. Yeah. His 40-yard dash, some of the best in this wide receiver class. 4.38 40-yard dash, 90th percentile with a 1.55 split. He's a guy that I think personally is one of the speedier guys in the class, and
for sure
he's got a great vertical. He's going to be one of those guys who, in the 2nd or 3rd round, if you're looking for maybe a guy on the outside who can get up and get the ball, it's going to be him.
Yeah, no, I agree. He has to be able to high point the ball, and that vertical is what he uses to kind of compensate for. It's almost like, you hear about people that are blind. They have enhanced senses. Their hearing is better, their taste and their smell. Like he's lacking in the size department, the height department. You say 5, you come in at 5'11", like he's not the tallest guy out there. He can compensate with the fact that dude's got hops. He can get up and high point the ball, even if you got a couple of inches on him. So I like that a lot. In college, kind of a backwards track, right? You look at his PFF grade year by year. The past 3 seasons, he's gone way up and then down and back up just a little bit. But in 2020, he had his premier year in college, dropped an elite 88.8 grade. Fantastic out there at Oklahoma. Had in 11 games, 37 receptions for 610 yards and 9 touchdowns. He was a touchdown machine that year, put up 11 touchdowns in the next 2 years and increased his yardage, almost 1,800 yards in the next 2 years combined. And in his last season, caught 54 balls. So like this guy had an impressive impact for his team at Oklahoma. The only concern, obviously, is that size. Let me mention my 10th guy, Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati, because you said you weren't huge on him. He's really popular in these parts with Tennessee Titans folks, because the Titans have a lot of love for him. It sounds like Mike Vrabel has a pretty deep connection to Cincinnati because his BFF coached there for a long time. I think he's a good receiver that's going to be a day 2 pick for sure. He continues to climb up the boards. What on tape did you see from him that you weren't crazy about? I'm curious what the downsides were for you.
I don't know how much of it is tape as much as it's another size outlet, right?
Issue.
I think he came in at like 5'9", 177. Yep. And okay, how many fast small guys are in this freaking class? Like there's
17,000.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that I can talk myself into him. He's also small and fast. I can talk myself into him. He's also small.
It's just a bunch of shrimps, man.
At a certain point, it's like a scarcity question where it's like, this is not a scarce resource in this draft. Yeah. You can go find other guys. And where I think what would separate Tyler Scott for me, and something that obviously we're not as closely a part of, is like some of the interview process, right? It's hearing from a Tyler Scott and hearing from a Darius Davis and hearing from a Trey Tucker and all the differences between all of these other fast, small receivers, and then having that be the edges. I think that why you see Scott from like NFL personnel have like these like high day 2 grades, round 2 grades, is not just because of the athleticism, but I think it's also someone that is like performing really, really well in the interview process. People are liking that part of it as well. I have no problem with people who view him as a top 10 receiver. It's just you can go down the list on how many Tyler Scott types.
It gets cookie cutter really fast. Yeah,
exactly.
JT, let's run down some of the numbers on Tyler Scott.
Another really, really small guy here. 5'9" and 5/8, 177, 30 and 7/8 arm length. He's a guy that the Titans, a lot of people are mocking him to the Titans.
Well, the Titans seem to love him based on their involvement in this offseason process.
He ran a 4.44 40. Could be a complimentary guy to Treylon Burks. But I think there's a couple other guys that you could probably find in the second or third round personally that I would take over Tyler Scott. I'm kind of on the train here with Austin that he's not my favorite. I think there's other guys like A.T. Perry or a Cedric Tillman or someone like that I'd rather take that I think fits,
right?
That fits what the Titans are going for a little bit better. But his speed and what he was able to do last year are no joke, though.
It is. I'm with you that it is kind of another dime a dozen situation here. And it is interesting that of all the later-ish, mid to late round guys the Titans have expressed interest in this offseason, Tyler Scott has been chief amongst them. You would expect it to be somebody that meets the Titans wide receiver profile a little bit more, like a Jayden Reed or a Michael Wilson, or like you mentioned, a Cedric Tillman or an A.T. Perry. But JT, I think it may be reflective of this seed change we're seeing with the Titans looking for speed, looking to get a little bit smaller, a little bit faster. This guy with 4.44 brings that to the table. And, he was a former running back. So he's built, while he's got kind of the same size as these other smaller guys in the class, this slot only concerning size guys in the class, his body, when you look at him, he looks a little bit different than them. He's a little bit thicker in certain areas. He may be a little bit more durable in that way. That might be one of the things the Titans are most attracted to for him. From a statistical standpoint in college, his grade, the grade that sticks out the most is his grade versus man coverage this past season, a 52.8, which is well below average. So this guy's not great against man. He's fast enough, but I guess the concern, the reason why he wasn't able to succeed as well as you'd think with his speed is just because it didn't matter. These bigger cornerbacks, these bigger DBs, these safeties lurking over the top were able to out-physical him, outsize him, and keep him from winning in man coverage a ton. His drop rate is also concerning. Had 7 drops, 11.3% in this past season. So there's some drop issues there. I know Titans fans aren't crazy to hear that. There's a lot to love, though, okay? His yards per route run, 2.49, well above average, bordering on elite. Contested catch rate, 55%. That's well above average as well. 6.6 yards after the catch per reception. I'm sure that's one of the things the Titans are seeing and liking about him, that he's able to get some yards after the catch, and he's got 12 missed tackles forced this past season, which is high amongst these small guys that we're talking about today. In his 3 seasons, the past 3 seasons at Cincinnati, he's one of those guys, and I've mentioned it in pretty much every positional episode we've done, JT. Every single year, he improved. I like a guy that is still trending in the right direction. And I think with Tyler Scott, who is only 21 and a half years old, will be 22 this year, is still trending in the right direction. 2020, a 53.1 grade. 2021, a 65.5 grade. And then 2022, a 72.1 grade. Okay. In this past season, caught 55 balls for 904 yards, 16.4 yards per reception. So he's getting big chunk plays every single game, 9 touchdowns. He was utilized really well in the red zone. I think red zone threat, former running back, built a little different. A nice yards after the catch number for a guy of his size, a really nice missed tackle number for a guy of his size, nice yards per route run number, nice contested catch number. All of these things point to the reasons why I think the Titans are interested in him as a late round guy. All right, so who did you have at 9?
My number 9 in this class, I think I'm going to be the highest on this guy of anybody. You could surprise me. Michael Wilson of Stanford. I know the injuries are scary.
You're not higher than Chris Sims. Chris Sims thinks he's a top 5 receiver in this class, but then you're number 2. You're number 2.
Michael Wilson is freaking awesome. I have in my notes here give me the sharpness in his route tree, the quickness, the suddenness, the movement skills all day. I know he's only played like a handful of snaps in his career. He's going to have injury concerns. He's a little bit of a smaller, like stockier frame. Like I think he's viewed more like a running back. He was listed at 6'2" at Stanford, but nowhere near that, obviously, when he measured in.
Right.
I don't love how inconsistent he is. And that's both from an availability perspective. And also I feel like his hands can be inconsistent at times, but like his best plays are up there with the best plays of the top receivers in this class. I think Michael Wilson, Michael Wilson has it. And you saw that at the Senior Bowl. You see that on his tape. I think everyone who has not watched Michael Wilson, go turn on the Washington tape. This dude was putting on an absolute clinic against Washington. I think it's some of the best receiver tape of any of these players in this class. The only reason you're probably low on him is injuries and obviously not at the top of the testers, and there's some size stuff there. But like, man, you tell me you can get Michael Wilson in 10 games a year and you're going to get that suddenness and that quickness. He's someone that I think can win on the outside despite the frame, all that stuff. He's a guy I'm willing to bet on.
He's a guy, as I go through these receivers, every time I watch his tape, I find myself moving him up the board just a little bit by a little bit, because you're right. If it weren't for the fact that he only I'm looking here, he's only played 14 games over the past 3 seasons, like definitely concerning. But if you, like you said, if you can get him for 10 games a year, the tape is there. I think he's a relatively polished player. In the games that he did play in, like you mentioned, he had a massive impact. And although he wasn't going up against the best talent in the world, again with Stanford, I definitely can see his game translating to the NFL. And if you are looking for a guy with a little bit more size, he's not the biggest dude in this class, but compared to the average of the top talent, he's certainly bigger than a lot of these guys we've mentioned. So I don't hate that at all. JT, if you wouldn't mind, take us through some of the numbers for Michael Wilson out of Stanford.
Yeah, so Michael Wilson comes in as maybe a middle-of-the-road guy here for height. He's 6'1" and 5/8", 213 pounds, so he's on the heavier side of these guys. So he's a bigger-bodied guy, 31-inch arm length, and then ran a 4.58 40.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me there is the 31-inch arms and the size, right? If you're looking for a guy in the later rounds who's got that size element that we are really struggling to find in this draft, he's there. This is the guy. And on tape, I know we talked with Austin about how there was some really, really fantastic stuff there. It's just a matter of availability. And you have to be concerned with the fact that, yeah, he only played 15 games in the past 3 years. This past season in 2022, he put up a 74.5 PFF grade, 6 games played, had 4 touchdowns in those games on 27 receptions, only 4 drops. But again, he didn't play much. His body of work is just really tough to project because it's a lot like Anthony Richardson a little bit, where you're like, he just didn't play a lot of ball, right? Michael Wilson didn't play a lot of ball. 5 deep catches, forced 2 missed tackles, 6.9 yards after the catch per reception. Like, not the best numbers in the world, but on tape, you just see a lot of traits that are going to translate to the NFL really, really well. And I think it's going to be hard for a team looking for a flyer on early day three on a receiver who can have an impact on their team. They're going to see this big-bodied guy as one of the only vestiges of size left in this class, and it's going to be an easy match, I think. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about your number 8. I guarantee it's not my number 8, which we'll mention in a second, because it's A.T. Perry, who I really, really like, and we'll talk about that briefly. But,
I'm all here for A.T. Perry love.
Okay.
I love A.T. Perry.
All right. Well,
I think A.T. Perry's great. I think it's tough. It's tough.
Let's talk about him then.
To fit. Go ahead. Give me your A.T. Perry love.
Well, so it's the tape for me. His size combined with his footwork is kind of insane. I think that he's a really polished guy in that way. I'm trying to pull up his numbers here. JT, do you have his numbers in front of you?
Yeah, I can get him in a second.
Okay, because I know he's like 6'3", 200 pounds, a little bit on the older side, but on tape, you just see a guy that I think his game is going to translate really well and pretty quickly to the NFL. And it really is a scarcity thing. Like you mentioned, the inverse of the small, fast slot only maybe kind of guy in this class, of which there are plenty. There really are just a handful of guys at this level in terms of their size. And in the NFL, I still do think size wins. I mean, coming from a guy who covers the Tennessee Titans, I've been watching a lot of Traylon Burks and A.J. Brown and Corey Davis in the past couple of years. And I know that that's the kind of size that you can use well in the NFL, and in the right scheme, it can be kind of deadly. So that's intoxicating enough to me to put him in my top 10 What were your thoughts on him when you watched him?
I really did like the tape. I thought the tape was fantastic. I think he consistently gets open. There's a lot of experience there. There's size there. I'd be interested to hear who you had as comps for him. I feel that my comps I wrote down, Josh Reynolds is someone that I think he plays very similar to. I think Josh Reynolds.
That was my only comp, and the only reason why is because he stopped through Tennessee for 10 seconds a couple of years ago, and then got out of town. But I'm like, that's kind of who this guy is to me. Yeah.
Josh Reynolds, I think, is like honestly probably his like average comp. If it was a range of outcomes, 50% distribution, I think that's where he could probably hit, and where the concerns with Josh Reynolds is he's not sudden, right? And like when you're not sudden, when you don't have that immediate clicks, it's very hard to consistently win. However, reliability, catch radius, sure-handedness, all that stuff has allowed for, Josh Reynolds to have this kind of longer career. Someone else I put in probably more of like the ceiling comps area, and he's a little bit of an older guy, Sidney Rice, who played for Minnesota, played for Seattle for a little bit. Yeah. Bigger-bodied receiver. I think he was 6'4", 200 pounds, 4.5s guy. Sidney Rice played in the league, though, where size was still coveted. There were a lot less small, fast receivers in that version of the NFL than there are now. Sure. Like, I don't know how much Sidney Rice – I'm not saying he doesn't see the field, but, like, his skill set isn't as coveted as it was 10 years ago, right? Or even 15, 20 years ago. So teams that like size and teams that covet the Reynolds types in their basketball team of receiving cores, that expression that gets overused at this point, they're going to like A.T. Perry. But teams that are like Miami – the Giants, to some degree, with how they built that receiver room, they're going to be like, or even like I think the Niners, to some degree, they're going to look at A.T. Perry and be like, no thanks. Like we want fast, we want sudden, we want speed, yak, break tackles. However, there are teams I still think that covet A.T. Perry's skill set, that Reynolds type, that like bucket getter, that I think teams will kind of chase.
JD, hit me with some of the numbers on A.T. Perry. Finally, a big fellow we get to talk about.
Yeah, 6'3" and 5/8", 198 pounds, so a little bit still on the skinny side. Sure. 33 in a fourth arm length, so finally a guy who's got some reach on him.
Yeah, he does.
And still, even for that size, he's still pretty fast with a 4.47 40 time, which is in the 63rd percentile. If there was a guy that the Titans would want to target in the second or third round, I think he is my guy.
I'm with you. There on paper, what isn't there to love about A.T. Perry, right? Like maybe you can quibble with the fact that it's almost 6'4". He's stretching that 200-pound frame a little bit thin, but that's what you have to do in order to have the speed that he has, right? He's on the older side, 23 and a half years old, but like I'm not worried about him looking good in bed when we're 55 years old and married. I'm looking for a guy that I can rent for 4 years to play wide receiver, and then we'll move from there, right? Like whatever, right? He's a long-limbed guy, which is hard to come by in this draft class. He gives quarterbacks a lot of margin for error because of that, right? You don't have to be as precise with him because he can high point the ball over the cornerback. He can find the ball if it's in front of him, behind him. Like that allows you a cushion that I think goes understated sometimes. From a year-to-year standpoint, really broke out in 2021 and continued that in 2022 with 2 years of 82.6 and 83.4 overall receiving grades, respectively. Really fantastic, very available, right? Played in 14 games in 21, played in 13 games in 22, caught 71 and 81 balls in those 2 seasons for just short of 1,300 and 1,100 yards, respectively. In 2021, he had 18.3 yards per reception for JT. 15 touchdowns, and this past year had another double-digit touchdown number of 11. Now, he's playing for Wake Forest. He's playing some interesting teams out there, and in terms of Wake Forest talent, he was getting the vast majority of the looks, right? So that's part of the reason why. But in terms of can this guy win? Can he handle a high volume of production? Can he handle being on the field and being given that responsibility? Yeah, he can. We've seen it 2 years in a row, right? We've seen this past season an 1,100-yard, 11 touchdown season where he had 13.6 yards per reception. Now, for his size, his yards after the catch number is kind of concerning. Just 2 yards after the catch on average, which is 518th in the country, according to PFF. I would just attribute that to the fact that he's a big fella and he doesn't have a really low center of gravity. So he's a relatively easy tackle, only 5 missed tackles forced. He's got a little bit of a drop issue, 8 drops, although it's a large sample size, so only a 9% drop percentage. That's actually a hair below average. So I guess that irons itself out. he's got 10 deep catches. So like at his size, at his speed, he absolutely can be your X. The high end for him is a true bona fide wide receiver one on an NFL team, a real X receiver. And I think that alone is reason for you to take him before day 2 ends. If this guy's still on the board at the end of day 2, my jaw will be on the floor and I'll be lobbying for every team. The first pick on day 3. Okay, no, the second pick. Whoever is up should be taking A.T. Perry, in my opinion, because I really, really like this guy. Yeah, so who did you have as your wide receiver 8?
My wide receiver 8, and this guy, honestly, has been talked up to me. At first, I didn't love him. My initial comp for him was Tylan Wallace with more speed, and Tylan Wallace, I think, is not managed to see the field maybe as much as you'd like, but I did really like him coming out of OK State. This is Jayden Reed out of Michigan State.
Yeah.
Tylan Wallace, when you turn on the OK State tape, he was a guy that, okay, he's small, but he catches everything through contact. Like any time he's being contacted, you're seeing him come down with the football. He's a big contested catch guy. Middle of the pack suddenness, middle of the pack, separation, but someone that you just felt every single time was going to come down with the football. I think you saw that with Jayden Reed. Going back to Jayden Reed's 2021 tape versus Michigan, that one loss that Michigan had was insane. Like he had so many of the spectacular plays that Michigan State needed to win that football game. Obviously, Kenneth Walker gets all the love because I think he had like 3 touchdowns, 250 yards in that game. But like Jayden Reed in the 2021 tape against Michigan, against really good secondary players, I thought was phenomenal. I think he's carried some of that with horrendous quarterback play at Michigan State. Michigan State has not had the guys under center to put up numbers as a pass catcher, and he's still managed to do that. I think Jayden Reed is going to have a better NFL career than he had a college career. And when you slot him in, I won't say the other guys have in this tier, but when you slot him into this tier, even with the guys I mentioned below, Michael Wilson, Marvin Mims, the A.T. Perrys, the Tank Dells, you're betting on he's not that big, but there's things he's done at the college level that if he can try and mirror it in the NFL, you're going to have a productive player. I like taking those swings on guys in this range.
Yeah, Jayden Reed, I think there is a lot to like, and our guy Zach Lyons says Jayden Reed, Hive, stand up. He's a guy who here in town has written a lot about guys that would fit well with the Titans, and I think this is a guy that absolutely would fit well with the Titans, like Zach laid out here. He screams Titans wide receiver. He is kind of a niche guy, like A.T. Perry. I'm not sure he's going to be for everyone, but his kind of versatile skill set, I absolutely agree, could work well in the NFL. And he is one of those guys that when you watch him on tape, I agree with you that you can see a little bit more NFL to their game than college maybe. And you're right that in Michigan State, he was kind of playing maybe with one hand tied behind his back at times. So I don't hate that at all. And in terms of value, where this guy ends up going, I mean, if you can get this guy on day 3, you are so happy because this is going to be a guy that is going to be an impact relatively quickly, I think. JT, run down some of the numbers for Jayden Reed out of Michigan State, please.
Jayden Reed comes in at 5'10" 3/4 in the 17th percentile, 187 pounds, so a small and skinny guy, and then his arm length doesn't help much more at 30 and a half. We talked with Austin about this, but he's going to be a guy who's not going to win based on his metrics, but what his versatility brings a team that drafts him.
Yeah, and he's kind of a tough comp from his college days to the NFL as well, just because of the fact that at Michigan State did not have a lot of help around him in that passing attack. He did all that he could, and on tape you can kind of see this dude having to carry this team, and his back is struggling a little bit because he's got the whole team on his back, right? He's a pretty good route runner, right? He's able to separate and do the things that you want in that way, especially for a guy of that size. He's one of those guys that improved year on year, although in 2021, that was really his marquee year. That was his most healthy season, played 13 games, 59 receptions for over 1,000 yards. This is only 1,000. It's only his only 1,000 yard receiving season in college. But he had 17.4 yards per reception that year for 10 touchdowns. Dude blew up in 2021. Step back of sorts in 2022, a 70.4 PFF grade, played in 11 of their games, 55 receptions, and on 84 targets. So he increased his percentage there. Only 636 yards, but a perfectly acceptable 11.6 yards per reception and 5 touchdowns. Guy had 5 drops in 2022, so not a huge drop issue, but there were some concerns in that department. He wins as a contested catch guy, right? Despite his size, despite his arm length, 64.7% contested catch rate for Jayden Reed, and he's got the yards per route run that you would like to see, 1.83. Only 4 yards after the catch per reception. So this guy's not exactly breaking any tackles. You wouldn't expect him to at that size. He's pretty consistent. You look at his game by game grades in the last season in college. He had a couple of outliers that were really great games, but no games that were truly horrible for him. So he's pretty consistent week to week. I think he's going to be a pretty decent player.
For me, and why I think this receiving class, there's 2 reasons why this receiving class, I think in media and also like in the NFL, will be kind of pushed up. It's one, it's a valuable position. Every team needs a receiver. We saw that with the trades for Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and A.J. Brown last year. Like, teams need high-end, high-caliber receiving talent to be, deep postseason contenders. It's a valuable position. It's one of the highest paid positions in the league.
Right. 2,
why it's also prioritized in media is obviously it's a sexy position, one that's fun to scout, one that's fun to look at and draw numbers to and look at athleticism to and all those things.
Well, the average guy can look at a receiver and say, good, not good. Exactly. It's really easy.
Exactly. Yeah. Realistically, Jayden Reed is 5'10", 187 pounds. It's very difficult, or almost 5'11". It's very difficult to win the NFL when you are that small. I think weight is the most under-discussed thing with receiver. After that, it's arm length. And if you do not get into the 50, 60, 70th percentile of those 2 things, weight and arm length, it is hard to win in the NFL as an outside receiver. And I think that's important as well. I know 3 receivers start generally for teams, right? A lot of 11 personnel in the NFL today. Outside receiver versus slot receiver is a different game. You obviously see a higher percentage of press coverage at outside receiver, and also you're asked to run a completely different route tree. Slot receiver, obviously see less press, given more free releases, running more underneath stuff, all of that stuff kind of changes. To play outside receiver, which maybe you're drafting a Jayden Reed to be, it's what he did at Michigan State, hard to do with his arm length and his weight, right? Totally. It's hard. And I think that from there are going to be a lot of teams, if not most teams, like slot-only player for Jayden Reed, slot-only player for Tank Dell, slot-only player even for Zay Flowers, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, slot-only for Josh Downs, slot-only for all of these guys that do not have the weight, do not have the height, do not have the arm length requirements to be outside receivers. At that point, wouldn't be surprised if few receivers do end up going in these spots that we suggested.
That's a great point. You accidentally sort of answered a question that we'd gotten here from Jacob Sane, who says the general sense I've gotten from media is that this is a quote unquote weak wide receiver class because it lacks star power, but it certainly feels like a deep class with a lot of mid-round value. I think there is maybe more value to be had in this receiver class all in all in the second and third days, because there are some guys that you like you like a trait or you like the tape, and they just maybe not be the complete package in terms of their college profile, but they work well in the NFL. Would you classify this as a weaker wide receiver class? Maybe weaker than recent ones we've had, but while the top might be a little bit smaller than folks like, I'm not sure it's necessarily as weak as we once thought it may be.
I don't know. It's tough.
It's just a different class to me. I think it's a different
class, and you're betting on a lot of outliers. I think Ben Solak recently did a video on the Ringer YouTube channel talking about.
Yeah, I watched it. It was a great video.
Year. Exactly. This year we had, I think, 9 or 10 receivers that weighed under 190 pounds come to the combine, the most in the last 21 years or whatever it was. That in general makes it objectively a weaker class. You have smaller guys. You have smaller guys, and it's hard for that many small guys. And not all of them are 4.2 burners, right? You have small guys that are running in the low 4.4s to high 4.4s range. The league doesn't ask for that. The league is looking for big and fast. And when you don't have that, it's hard to say that this position group at large is a stronger group, right? You have guys that you like, and I'm happy to talk myself into a Rashee Rice. I'm happy to talk myself into some of these guys at the depths of the receiving class. But I also know when you're looking at the range of outcomes, there's a good reason why these guys won't pan out, right? Every guy probably after after Jaxon Smith-Njigba, it is very easy to say, this is why maybe he won't work out. This is why, exactly. Whereas in previous
and even
classes,
JSN, you can be like, remember that time you had a hamstring and missed an entire season?
Exactly. And then you have, when you look at previous classes, it was hard to figure out why Jamar Chase was not going to pan out. And even with Devontae Smith, and he had his weight concerns, it's like, dude, this guy has done it at the hardest level possible. The testing is there. Won the Heisman at receiver, which you rarely see. Those classes, it's incomparable.
The thing for me, and we could talk about this all day long, but the thing for me that the countervailing point to that, and I'll play a little devil's advocate here, it is kind of tricky to maybe project the marrying of a change in the NFL as to what works at wide receiver. Because I think we do see a league today in which, it used to be a bad thing in the NFL draft. Oh, he's slot only. Well, okay. Cooper Kupp, slot only, right? Like you got guys who have body types. Tyreek Hill is a slot only body type, but he's a freaky difference maker. And yes, you're not necessarily finding your Tyreek Hill in this draft. There's a speed element there that you don't necessarily have. But I do think that as the NFL shifts away from pure size dominance, and yes, I still think size wins. Absolutely. I've already said it once on this show. I do think we see teams opening their mind up a little bit to, so what, he's slot only. Maybe he's amazing in the slot and he's still going to tear you to shreds, and we don't mind that.
I think that my response to that is you can only have so many slot only players in your locker room, right, or in your receiving room.
And now you do have to consider the
I agree.
Right?
I agree that slot only players have value, but not at the same volume that inside outside versatility has.
And not if you have only four only slot guys on your team, right?
Exactly. I mean, look at the New York Giants. The New York Giants don't even know how they're going to field outside receivers with who they have on that roster. It's like when you can bring in guys that you know have the size, weight requirements to play inside and outside with maybe limitations that these slot only types are faster or whatever, it's easier to talk yourself into that room than it is with guys that have like specific skill sets. I was on a hit earlier today and I was like, Kadarius Toney's electric. I would hate to have a receiving room with only Kadarius Toney's. Like I can't win with that. I need guys that can go get a bucket. I need guys that can go win as outside receivers consistently, do the polished necessities of the receiver position that win in this league versus having Kadarius Toney, an electric player with the ball in his hands. It's hard to scheme that many touches to a room of all those guys.
All right, let's keep trucking along here. Who is your wide receiver 6 in this draft?
Wide receiver 6.
Or, sorry, 7. We skipped 7.
7.
Yeah.
That's right. I have Josh Downs here. And Downs, to me...
Lower than me. I want to know what you don't like about him.
Yeah, for me, Josh Downs, another small receiver, right?
Totally. Yep.
Percentile height. Second percentile weight.
Not great.
Narrowly beats out the 30-inch arm threshold that I look at for outside receivers. 12th percentile arm length. Right then and there, you have to be phenomenal. You have to be Dotson level of catch radius. Dotson level, and I bring up Dotson only because that's a smaller receiver that I was lower on coming out that I think proved me wrong in a lot of ways in that the route running is still holding up and his catch radius is still holding up.
Right.
That you have to be that good with those limitations in size to succeed in the league. And I can't bet on that, man. When I got Trey Tucker right down the line, when I got Tank Dell right down the line, I can get another small guy in here. And like that to me, again, comes back to the interview process. It comes back to the medical history. There have to be other factors because there's too many of these guys that are Downs types in that uber productive college players, small, fast, slot only is probably in the NFL. Why, if I have to take Josh Downs in the top 50 selections of this draft, and I can take a Darius Davis, a Trey Tucker, a Tyler Scott in round 3, round 4, you really need to convince me why I should make that change. And it has to be either in the interview room or it has to be in the medicals or whatever. It has to be in these different areas. So
it's a value proposition for you, which I can totally understand. The thing for me, it's funny that you mentioned Dotson because he was a guy that I wasn't crazy about. I thought that drafting him in the first round last year was a pretty ridiculous thing to do. And then he proved us wrong, obviously. Maybe this is me just swinging too far back in the other direction. He's my wide receiver 5 in this class, just because in terms of the shrimp, outside of maybe the Zay Flowers, who I think is a little bit different and is higher on my board, he is the top guy for me. Getting to see him at the combine, the dude is just he's walking through water with how fluid his movement is. I think that his hands are fantastic. I think that his footwork is really, really great. Yeah, I don't see him being great outside of the slot. I think you could use him as a flanker relatively effectively, but he's certainly not going to be an outside guy at the next level. I am thinking that if I'm going to bet on one of these small slot only-ish guys in this draft class, he's that guy for me. JT, if you wouldn't mind, give us the numbers on Josh Downs out of North Carolina.
So Josh Downs is going to be the smallest of the small. When you come by these receivers in this class, he is one of the smallest, 5'9" and 1/8, which is the 8th percentile for his height, 171 pounds, which is 2nd percentile. And then not even the 31-inch arms that Austin has kind of set at his limit here with 30 3/8 arm length here with a 12th percentile, a 4.48 40, so still respectable, but that's not really what we liked in him at the combine. It was how fluid and how well he ran all the drills there compared to everyone else.
I'm with you where it's kind of hard to describe what you and I were sitting there experiencing together, right? He's running through these on-field drills in Lucas Oil Stadium at the Combine where all three of us, including Austin, were, and it caught our eye. I mean, you and I both were like, this Downs kid, he may not be the biggest. He may be kind of amongst the crowd of shrimp in this class where you're concerned about their size and the fact that it's kind of a dime a dozen in this class. There are so many to choose from, and you question whether or not the value is there. But the footwork, the dude is an absolute king with his footwork, kind of just like built in a factory in terms of how agile he is and how smooth he moves. It looks like he's moving in slow motion, but sped up, if that makes any sense. Like if somebody applied a Premiere Pro stabilizing, like a stabilizer in post to make the motion more smooth, that's what Josh Downs' movement ability is. And his hands are fantastic, attacks the football in the air. Started off relatively slow in college, 66.1 PFF grade in 2020. But in the past 2 years at North Carolina, mind I mention, not the greatest team in the world, not the best passing attack in the world. This guy went absolutely bonkers, played in 13 and 11 games the past 2 years. PFF grades north of 80 in each of those 2 seasons. In 2021, he caught 101 balls for 1,335 yards and 8 touchdowns. And in 2022, 94 receptions for 1,029 yards and 11 touchdowns. So this guy was a production monster in college, had a couple of massive games last year, had a couple of down games last year. So a little bit of up and down in terms of week to week, only 3 drops. 4 yards after the catch. That's the theme with these small guys, right? They're not breaking a ton of tackles, but his contested catch rate is really high for somebody of his size, 72.2%. His yards per route run is well north of average, kind of in the 75th percentile area of 2.17 yards per route run. So this is a guy that, while he's not getting a ton of yards after the catch, I see here in this last season, 7 missed tackles forced. So he's shifty enough to make you miss. I like a lot of things about Josh Downs. So that's just the guy I'm willing to go out on a limb for. Who's your wide receiver 6?
This is another guy I think I'm too high on. I'm going to come back and I'm going to be like, why was I too high on this guy? And it's Cedric Tillman at 10.
No. You're not too high. No.
I love Cedric Tillman.
He's my 6 too. I love Cedric Tillman.
In a class where everyone's small, he's big. 6'3", 213, long arms, almost 33-inch arms, which is something to look for. Big hands, 10-inch hands. And he's not super slow. 10-yard split, you'd like it to be a little bit faster. 4.54 40-yard dashes, I think was he ran, which is only 0.06 of a second off of what Josh Downs run, who is being obviously a smaller type and 170, like literally like 40 pounds lighter, running that much slower is something where like Tillman, as hard as it is to evaluate Jalin Hyatt, it's equally hard to evaluate Tillman because he was not asked to run an NFL route tree.
Yep.
But that
whole team is impossible to evaluate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what he does have is NFL size, and I think NFL pass catching ability. He's going to be a plus blocker in the NFL. Give me Cedric Tillman, and I think it's between him and Jalin Hyatt is so much closer than people think. It is not Hyatt round 1.
Austin, I tweeted out this morning, happy Monday morning. I think Cedric Tillman is a better NFL prospect than Jalin Hyatt. Hope you have a great day, which in this part of the country, not a great thing to necessarily say because the Tennessee fans love them some Jalin Hyatt.
For sure.
But what I'm betting on is we've seen how many times have we seen a guy who had an amazing penultimate year in college and then injuries kept them away from our eyeballs in their last season. And then they fall down the board a little bit farther than they should. And then we're like, oh, this is that guy that we were projecting to be a really, really nice top level pick in the NFL draft. And he just wasn't available as much in his final year. I think if Jalin Hyatt didn't exist, then Cedric Tillman would be significantly higher on folks' boards. And he is, to me, the last vestige of, if you're looking for a guy with a little size, like this is the last stop on day 1 and day 2. Because I really do think, do you have a comp for him? Because to me, I see a lot of a lower end, like not great scenario. And these are both Titans comps is a little Justin Huntery.
Okay.
But I think if he works out, you could see a little bit more of a Corey Davis kind of guy. I think his ceiling is a great wide receiver too. I don't see him necessarily leading a team, but I think that he could be, if you have somebody that is that true X ball winner on your team, I think that he could be that guy for you.
I have Mohamed Sanu, and I don't think people love Mohamed Sanu's career, but like again, consistent, physical, big bucket getter, could go like reliable. And I think those are traits that you are few and far between. Like you said, you got Quentin Johnston. Then I think you have Cedric Tillman as this next big guy. And then maybe you're looking down at A.T. Perry as other guys that maybe fit that mold. Everyone else, when you go down the line, is speed, speed, speed. Maybe there is some reliability there and just smaller frames, right? Guys that you probably want playing in the slot. So Mohamed Sanu is not the sexy Hall of Fame comp that people chase during this draft process, but that's kind of who he reminded me of.
I have no problem with that at all. I love me some Mohamed Sanu, and also like Cedric Tillman. Like, I agree with that like wholeheartedly. He's someone that I've watched like the most recent out of anyone, and I know it's the fun thing to go watch the 2021 tape on Cedric Tillman because of what happened last year with the injury and whatnot, and it's hard to evaluate him, like you said, with what route tree he runs. But man, if he could do it once in 2021, I would have no problem using a late second, early 3 on Cedric Tillman.
The thing for me trying to differentiate between these two Tennessee receivers is, both in terms of the scheme that they were in, it's impossible to project to the NFL. But whose traits, whose game do I think works better as an NFL projection? And to me, every time I ask myself that question, it's Cedric Tillman. JT, what are the numbers on big fella Cedric Tillman?
Yeah, clocking in at 6'3", 213 pounds. He's got really big arms too, with a 32 3/4. What kind of knocks him down a few pegs is his speed and kind of the route tree that he ran in college, but still he had a respectable speed of 4.54.
Yeah, no, he's got a good enough speed for his size, right? At 4.54. Considering the fact that he's 215, 6'3", like that's not a concern. You mentioned his arm length. I love the catch radius on this guy. He's got a vertical route tree where he can be a true X receiver for a team. He could also be a really nice flanker. I mentioned in our conversation with Austin that I see this guy being a really, really great wide receiver too in the right system. The thing that you want a little bit more from Cedric Tillman, the category you're looking for a little bit more from him, is his press coverage. He needs more answers in terms of just his toolbox, his skill set, his bag. He's not really got a lot of answers for press coverage other than just your basic hand fighting. Corners can match that physicality, take him out of the play entirely, force the quarterback to not even consider him because he's not able to get off of his guy and create separation in that way. But when he does separate, his speed and size combination is good enough to win in the NFL. Absolutely. He was a 5-year player at Tennessee, so he's got a lot of experience under his belt. And over those seasons, he only had 1 year in which he saw 60 plus targets in the kind of wonky volunteer offense, especially under the new coaching regime. Josh Heupel's offense, it's tough. It's a tough NFL comparison. We talk about that with Austin a good bit. But when he was healthy, when he was on the field, when he was being treated as that wide receiver 1, this guy had it. Okay. In 2021, which was the year where there was the most tape, right? He played the full season, 13 games, had 64 receptions for over 1,000 yards, 16.9 yards per reception. So definitely that ball winner down the field, 12 touchdowns. We love a double-digit touchdown receiving year. So we have that season to say, okay, this guy can handle 1,000-yard receiving season, double-digit touchdowns. He's a red zone threat as well as a deep ball threat, as well as a field stretcher, as well as a guy that you can trust to win across the middle of the field a good bit. Contested catch rate is average, 42.9%. Drop rate is very good, 5.1%. Only 2 drops in this past season. Only forced 3 missed tackles this past year, but again, that's only in 6 games. You really are projecting with him, right? You are hoping you get 2021 Cedric Tillman in terms of his college statistics and not 2022 version of him. You said they're so close. Is Hyatt your next guy?
Hyatt's my next guy.
Okay, let's talk about him then.
He's in the tier below my top 4. And I think there's a considerable gap between the top 4 that I have in this tier because
I agree.
This tier of Hyatt, Tillman, Downs, Reed, and then even bringing in Michael Wilson, Marvin Mims, you're getting to a point where fit matters so much. Like, do we have the skill set currently in our locker room? Is there a path to the football field to where he can continue to improve? And do we have a receiving coach and offensive coordinator and head coach that's going to buy this guy at his strengths and his weaknesses? And if because the guys in the top 4, they have eliteness in their game that like you can almost ignore their weaknesses. What was it? Bucky Brooks had said to me once, I think he said this a handful of times, don't tell me what he can't do, tell me what he can do. And like with Hyatt, Tillman, Downs, Reed. It's so easy to say what you can do. Jayden Reed, contested catches, Josh Downs, speed, smooth, fluid, all that stuff. Cedric Tillman, big, physical, Hyatt, speed. But when you get into what he can't do, what these guys have limitations of, there's a lot to list. And I think with Hyatt, I haven't seen him on the full route tree. Everyone's going to bring up Corey Coleman out of Baylor when he was running the same damn stuff and he was drafted very highly and then didn't make it. There's a lot of stuff not off field with Corey Coleman, but like the presence in the locker room and the coachability with Corey Coleman, I think led to where he was at. When you get to guys that can't do limitations, and I bring this up maybe more than other analysts too, but like the interviews matter, man. The interviews are what separates you. It's like when I was at the combine, I was kind of working together on a piece of the ringer talking about where are these like thresholds for players, right? Does he have to have 30-inch arms? Does he have to have 210 pounds to play this certain position? Mm-hmm. And what was time and time again brought up with GMs and with coaches was, yeah, we have those thresholds. Bigger thresholds, though, is do you want to be great? And it's like getting in the interview with the guys and seeing if they have that demeanor necessary to compete and to go up to the next level. Yeah. Like that was what Tobin brought up. That was what Martin Mayhew brought up. That's what Tepper brought up. Like all these guys have that same version of we go here to the combine to sit down with all these players that are on our draft board and really identify who's going to come into the room and say, I am willing to do whatever it takes to get better in the league and progress forward. Because that's what separates the relative athletic scores and these little things that you have in your Excel sheet from the people who are great and the people who aren't.
Yeah, the humans. I absolutely agree. Did you Hyatt's just such a hard guy to comp to the league. Did you even attempt to figure out who you think he could be?
I did not have a great comp for
I couldn't
Hyatt.
think of one either.
I'm looking at my notes here. No, I mean, there's Corey Coleman I wrote down just off the route tree alone, and then like John Ross, but like he's not even that fast. Like it's tough. Like he's very skinny. I worry about the weight, right?
Slender
176 pounds.
Yep.
That is scary. Like weight does not get brought up enough in wide receiver evaluation. I think the last time we talked about it this much was probably when Devontae Smith was being drafted, and he himself had to be an outlier, but he already was. That I think is always important in this conversation. Devontae Smith has to be an outlier to succeed in the NFL. What has he done in college football to prove it? Won the freaking Heisman, was absolutely dominant in every game he played, beat some of the best cornerback competition that any flight of receivers have ever taken. Do you have that? Can you have that same conversation with Hyatt? Can you have that same conversation?
He won the Biletnikoff, and they hit him behind the line of scrimmage for most of his season. So it's like, yeah, they didn't want people touching him, maybe because he's not all that big.
Exactly.
Yeah. JT, let me hear the numbers on Jalin Hyatt.
Jalin Hyatt coming in at just over 6 foot with 176 pounds on his body there. So he's going to be your burner. Of course, he's the Biletnikoff winner for a reason.
You're going to need him to be. Otherwise, I'm not sure what he's doing for you, right? 32.5-inch arms and ran a 4.4 flat 40. So he's definitely the guy if you want speed. If you want a guy who's going to be able to be durable, he might not be your guy. Yeah, the durability is a bit of a concern. It's obviously a vertical ball winner, right? What this guy has to be. His speed is what is touted about him. Now, his speed isn't the greatest. JT, remind me, what is the number for him?
4.4 flat.
4.4 flat. So it's a good speed, don't get me wrong, but it's at only 176 pounds. You'd like for that shslender guy. He's 6 foot, like he's got the levers. His legs are long enough. He just doesn't quite have the burst to get into that 4.3 range. Now 40-yard dashes, how much they matter. You can debate that till the cows come home. This guy was separated quite a bit often in college, but also there were many times when he was getting a running head start coming out of the backfield because they didn't want him on the line for press coverage, right? This Tennessee offense was so hard to evaluate from an NFL perspective. He's got elite juice when it comes to stretching the field. That he managed to take 15 touchdowns to the house last year. He really broke out this past season when he was given kind of the star power that Cedric Tillman had stepped away from with his injury, not in the limelight. Somebody had to step up for one of the best offenses in the entire league for college football. And Jalin Hyatt was that guy, right? 77.4 PFF grade in 2022, 52 passes caught for just shy of 1,300 yards. 18.9 yards per reception. So like, yeah, okay. Deep threat. Got it. Noted. He's the deep guy. It is such a fluky offense, but he made the most of it, right? You can't fault him for doing his job. 5 drops, a middle of the road drop rate of 6.9%, contested catch rate well above average. You mentioned his arm length 32 and what?
32.5.
Yeah, like for a guy, he's 6 foot. He's not short, but 32.5-inch arms. What's the percentile there?
32.5 is in the 65th percentile.
Those are long arms for his frame, especially considering how slender he is. He can kind of be a Venus flytrap for footballs in that way. He gives you a bigger target as a quarterback. And I think that allows for a lot of options in terms of how you utilize him in the NFL. Of course, it has to be an outside guy. It has to be a downfield guy, but I don't think he's a one-trick pony in that way necessarily. I like Cedric Tillman as an NFL prospect more than I do Hyatt. But that's not to say I dislike Hyatt. I just think that you're taking on a lot more risk if you bring him into your team. He's the first guy we've talked about today who's got a really, really nice yards after the catch. And that's really due to the fact that he was usually running past everyone on the field. He was the deepest guy. And once he had the ball, he just had to run to the house to score those 15 touchdowns. So he had 7.3 yards after the catch per reception, which was tied for 60th in the entire college football landscape. 8 missed tackles forced last year. It's perfectly fine. Is great against man. Very, very good. So he's a guy that is capable of getting off the line in a way that you like. But again, I have to mention the fact that sometimes he's winning against man because he's not having to do the press coverage, the hand fighting at the line. Tennessee's offense was kind of wonky in that way. Jalin Hyatt, a little bit of a projection at the NFL level, but I think it's going to work. All right, let's move on. We're on to our top 4 here, right? So I agree with you that I think there kind of is a gap here, and we get into the top 4 guys. It's the ones that if any of these guys are going in the first round, it's maybe these 4. So who is the least of the top 4 guys for you?
Wide receiver 4 for me is Jordan Addison.
Same thing. Same deal.
He, for me, is the guy that I'll be, I talked about guys I'll be beating myself up for being too high on. He's the guy that I might want to come back and wish I was lower on because the weight concerns. It's very rare you see guys of his size and his speed come out. I was on a podcast recently with Mike, and they're like, what about Isaac Bruce? I was like, Isaac Bruce was playing in the league when the cornerbacks were small. Everyone was smaller. The league was less physical. Like, when you go watch Isaac Bruce highlights, this guy's jogging out there and dusting kids wearing number 45 at corner. Jordan Addison's entering a different league. And he is going to be, if he's put on the outside, beaten to a pulp by some of these bigger, more physical, more explosive corners that we have in today's NFL. Addison, to me, yes, really talented. Look at his production, right? His production at USC specifically, like they were moving him around the line of scrimmage all the time. Crossers, screens, drags, all the shallow stuff, get plays after catch. Is that what you want in the first round? Are you drafting a guy that you're going to have to scheme touches and all that stuff in the first round? I just don't know. And yes, I have him as wide receiver 4. Very, very talented receiver. He's a guy, though, that I find myself easier to talk myself out of him than it is to talk myself into him. And that at a certain point, it's like maybe I'm looking, if I'm considering Addison, say, with the Chargers at 21 or in that range, do I consider another position? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, no, we're totally on the same page with him. He's the one that there's too many folks that I respect who are high on him for me to really tank his stock. Like when Daniel Jeremiah is out here talking about how he's his favorite receiver in this draft, I'm like, I don't know how to reconcile these things because I don't understand how you can love this guy from the first. Okay, what's his size? Okay, how fast is he? You've lost me already. You've lost me already on this guy. And yeah, the tape is better than what you see on paper for sure. He's a nice route runner, right? I think he can be a high-end number 2. Under no circumstances is this guy going to be your wide receiver 1. He's not going to be your X, I don't think. And his play strength was something that left a bit to be desired for me. But he won the Biletnikoff 2 years ago. He's a crafty guy. If you want to use him as your flanker only guy that is just going to be your crafty route runner under the middle, I'm not sure how much you're going to get after the catch. Like I'm with you where I struggle to find a lot of reasons to think there's a huge upside with him, and I can think of a number of things where I could say this just may not work in the NFL.
There are people who've thrown comparisons around for him. I've seen Calvin Ridley. I just can't. I can't get on board with Calvin Ridley. Maybe
Daniel Sanders. How about Sanders?
Sanders is a more crafty too.
Sanders is like an 85% comp for him, like a 90%. I don't see it happening.
There's a world where this guy's D.D. Westbrook, okay? And D.D. Westbrook, if you're a part of draft Twitter as long as I have, D.D. Westbrook was getting hyped up like the next freaking coming of Christ when he was coming out of Oklahoma, and then comes in small at the combine, doesn't test, and you're like, oh, okay, still buying myself into him. I'm still talking myself into him. And then he gets in the NFL and like size is a concern. You have to keep him touches, and here we are. Like, I worry that's what's going to happen with Addison. Now, I think that there are high-end comps with Addison where you're like, oh, that's maybe what he could be in the NFL. How different is this 5'11", 173-pound receiver that runs a 4.5 to Tank Dell, to Trey Tucker, to Tyler Scott, to Darius Davis, all these other guys, Josh Downs? How different is it? How different is he? Because he's going to have to be. Yep. When I look at this draft class and I see just a treasure trove of guys who fit the same athletic profile, he's more productive. Obviously, I think that his tape is the best of any of the small guys, which matters. I know it matters more in a lot of ways.
Right.
But again, he's going to have to be a lot different than these other guys, or else we're going to be looking back at the draft class. The Vikings took Jordan Addison at 20 whatever, and then Tyler Scott was there in round 3, and their production is very similar. That's the concern. You don't want to be looking back at this draft and saying that.
JT, run down the numbers real quick on Jordan Addison out of USC.
Yeah, so Addison's going to clock in here at 5'11", 173 pounds. That's the 3rd percentile for wide receivers here. 30 7/8 arms, so he's creeping right up on 31-inch arms. Mm-hmm. Speed's nothing really to write home about for that size. 4.4, 940.
Yeah.
He's gonna be someone that you're taking a gamble on him. I think personally in this draft.
Well, JT, you and I were sitting there in the stands at Lucas Oil Stadium at the Combine, and we it's like, all right, Jordan Addison, wide receiver, running his 40-yard dash. And we're like, all right, here we go. This guy is one of the top receivers in this class. Like, he's supposed to have that burner speed. Let's see it. And then he ran, what was the number?
4.49.
4.49. And we just look at each other like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all he brings to the table. And then unlucky for him, I don't know if you know this, at the USC Pro Day, it was the rainiest day in Southern California history. Mm-hmm. So the entire field was drenched. And apparently USC, they make a lot of money down there. I'm not sure what the concern is. They don't have an indoor football facility big enough for a 40-yard dash. They don't have 40 yards of field inside to do that. And I guess they wanted to have it on campus. So they ran in the puddles, and he wasn't able to really improve his number all that much. I don't know what the number came out to be, but I remember seeing it and being like, okay, same deal. Like, this is the bummer for him that he didn't get to run on a nice fast track, but Indy was a fast track and he only put up a 4.49. That's the concern. The speed and size combo. I'm not sure how well it works in the NFL. He's one of the smaller guys, bigger than the smallest guys in this class for sure, but not going to be that X by any means. I think he's going to be a high-end number 2 at best, right? He doesn't have that prototypical number 1 trait, really the traits you're looking for, the size, the speed, the intangibles. I don't see that with him, but he's a polished route runner, right? So he's going to be NFL ready in that way. He excels at creating separation, and his size is kind of an afterthought when you watch his footwork, his route running, how extensive his route tree mentally is already. He's got that, and we forget the fact that at Pittsburgh, the year before last season, he won the Blitnikoff. Like, this guy was Jalin Hyatt before Jalin Hyatt, really, like kind of an enigma of a draft prospect, but a really, really great college player. Moved to USC, doesn't have the greatest year, right? He still posts an 81.5 PFF grade. Certainly great, just nothing compared to his 88.8 in 2021 in Pittsburgh. That year, holy cow, JT. I'm looking at these numbers for probably not the first time, but the first time I'm really paying attention. In 2021 in Pittsburgh, he caught 100 balls on 144 targets, 1,593 yards, 15.9 yards per reception for 17 touchdowns. Yeah, that dude won the Blitnikoff. That checks out. Now at USC, no, go ahead.
And I was gonna say that is the buzz. Let's reunite him with Kenny Pickett, and that's just gonna happen again, right?
That's a great point. In the same facility and everything, just bring him in Pittsburgh. That's kind of the area where you could see him going in this draft too. Knowing Pittsburgh and their history with wide receivers, they tend to get the best out of them. So maybe that's the best possible landing spot for him. In 2022 at USC, again, he posted an 81.5 PFF grade. He caught 59 balls for 875 yards, nothing to sniff at, 14.8 yards per reception for 8 touchdowns. A good year, especially your first year in a system where there's a lot more mouths to feed, right? They were putting together a pretty serious operation over there once who's the Oklahoma coach that moved over there? I'm blanking on his name. Who's the coach at USC?
At USC, Lane Kiffin?
Lane Kiffin. No, it's not Lane Kiffin. What are you talking about? That's Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss. He was the coach at Oklahoma, and then they bought him away. I'm completely blanking on his name.
I don't know.
I'm
Lincoln Riley.
Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, I don't know why I had them.
We're not
a college show.
We're not a college show. Lincoln Riley brought over. The point is, he came from Oklahoma, brought over a lot of folks. There were more mouths to feed, so you can't necessarily drop him there. JT, it's the contested catch rate that sticks out to you the most when you look at the advanced numbers. 22.2% contested catch rate. Really, really dreadful. This guy's not a ball winner at the point of attack. He's not a ball winner at the high point. That's not his game. He's trying to get separation with his route running prowess, with his finesse, with his footwork. And when that happens, his grade versus man coverage is really good, 76.2. He adds 2.78 yards per route run, well above average drop rate, only 3.3%, only 2 drops last year. Like, those things are great. It's just that upper gear, that wide receiver 1 potential when it comes to size, when it comes to speed, when it comes to being a ball winner, a contested catch guy, a yards after the catch guy. He's got the yak numbers, 7.0 yards per catch, yards after the catch per reception, but the rest of it you're missing. He's only got 6 missed tackles last year, 9 deep catches. It's a fine resume. I just don't see the high end ceiling for him. Yeah, no, okay, so we're left with, I agree with you, and we're left with the top 3 guys here, according to many. It's Quentin Johnston, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers. Of these 3, who is the least amongst them in your eyes?
I have Quentin Johnston as my wide receiver 3.
And we're on the same page. Agreed. Yep.
The concerns I have.
This sucks. I hate that we're so on the same page about this. Makes for awesome radio.
The concern I have is the same concern everyone has. The separation, I think, is a little bit concerning.
Inconsistencies, drops. Yep.
I think that Duggan was not very good, and you'll see like some
don't
catching
say.
Stuff.
Yeah.
You'll go and I went back. I had Renner texted me. He's like, "How much of Johnston's drops are just Duggan throwing ducks?" And I was like, you know what? Let's go back.
It's fair
go
point.
Back and watch it.
Fair question.
And you look at it with the lens, and these are probably rose-colored glasses for Quentin Johnston. Mm-hmm. But look at it in the lens, it's like, how on target is that ball? And time again, you're seeing Johnston having to adjust dramatically to go get this football. And yeah, maybe they're cleaning off his hands, but like
in a way, we're kind of giving Zay Flowers a lot of credit for the things that we're knocking Quentin Johnston for, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, Johnston, there's likelihoods where he becomes an awesome pro, right? I mean, he is someone that lives up to this first-round status. I do worry, however, not getting elite speed, not getting elite suddenness when I'm chasing the receiver position, when I know that's what wins in today's NFL. What wins in today's NFL is you have to be extremely fast and have to be your 10-yard split and your explosiveness and all that stuff has to be top of the line if you're going to be a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 in the NFL. Even your big bully boys like A.J. Brown are speedy guys, types that dominate with the ball in their hands. I just don't know if you have that with Johnston. It'll be interesting. He's a guy, again, like he's my wide receiver 3. I'm high on him. I like him. I think he's a first-round player, especially in this year's draft class. Can I talk myself out of him? Yes. In the same way I can talk myself out of Jordan Addison, it's kind of very similar.
I agree. You have to be high on him in this class because he's really the only guy here at the top who can be a true X if he hits his ceiling, right? Like this guy can be your breadwinner at the edge of the line and is just going down and torching teams if he pans out. But I'm with you. I'm not sure if the speed is there. I'm not sure if he just, I just don't see that gear necessarily on tape that I want to see. That gear that you see AJ Brown throw on. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know where the 4.5 speed is there. Like that looks a lot faster than that. These cornerbacks are not catching him. And from a route tree perspective, it's fine. It wasn't great. That's a great point. And I hadn't really considered the fact that, we do knock Quentin Johnston a little bit for a lot of things that I think may be Max Duggan induced, whereas Zay Flowers is out here doing incredible things along those same lines. And we give him a lot of credit for it. But at this size, you have to be a huge fan of his. All right, JT, the last big guy on the board. Give us the numbers on Quentin Johnston.
Johnston comes in at 6'2" and 3/4, so not the tallest guy in here, but he rounds that out with a 208 pounds and a wingspan of 33 and 5/8. So he's going to be your guy who you're looking at. This is the wide receiver if you want him based on his size alone.
Yeah, no, he's a big fella. He's the best big fella in this class for sure. It's an explosive guy for his size. He's kind of a monster when it comes to just getting off the line of scrimmage, high knees, kicking it into high gear. He's going to be a handful for cornerbacks for sure, and he's going to be an X receiver wherever he lands. He is the most prototypical X guy in this class at the top. So you're going to play him outside. You're going to make safeties have to account for him on every snap. He's not the most physical guy in the world, right? That's the thing that leaves you wanting a little bit more. If he can tap into that size, use his big body in a way that is more effective, then he's going to be a better NFL prospect. But we just don't have that on tape. In terms of the stats from a college perspective, really consistent the past 3 seasons, 71.3 grade in 2020, followed that up with a 76.0 and then a 76.2. So he's been a good player that, like we mentioned with Austin, unfortunately having to catch balls from Max Duggan, which is not the greatest situation in the world, although they did get to the national championship. So we saw him get on a big stage and we saw him win on a big stage against who they beat Michigan. They knocked Michigan out last year. And so 6 touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. Played all 14 games last year, all the way into the playoff. So relatively durable. Played 9 games in each of the last the 2 seasons previous to this last one. So he's been an available guy. This past year, he caught 60 balls for 1,067 yards, 17.8 yards per reception for 6 touchdowns. His drop rate is concerning. 8 drops, 11.8%. But as we mentioned with Austin, how much that is that Max Duggan's fault? There's a portion of that is Max Duggan's fault for sure. I'll say that much. His yards per route run are very nice, 3.05%, but there weren't a lot of other receivers on TCU to throw the ball to, so that may be what's boosting that number. His contested catch rate for a guy this size, JT, you'd expect it to be well above average, right? No, 34.8%. It's like the 35th percentile or something. It's not the greatest in the world. 8 drops, as I mentioned. His yards after the catch per reception are really nice, 8.9 yards, tied for 10th in the college football landscape. So he's a stud when it comes to yak. If you get the ball in his hands, this guy's a monster, kind of the way that Treylon Burks, A.J. Brown, those guys operate. The issue is he's just not the ball winner that those 2 guys are at the point of attack. He's not high pointing the ball. He's not utilizing his size and his leverage to be a better contested catch, bigger catch radius guy as he can be. Physically, he has those tools. Again, when he's got the ball in his hand, 19 missed tackles forced last year and 10 deep catches. This guy's average depth of target is 12.9 yards. These are all numbers that are really good. You're concerned about him utilizing that size in a way that maximizes his potential. So with these last 2, I'm going to guess you're the same as me. Do we go Zay Flowers, JSN here to end?
I have JSN 1, Zay Flowers 2.
Yeah, same deal. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk Zay at 2. Dare I say his top end comp, Antonio Brown? I kind of see it on tape.
I'm not
just
there.
a little. I see it on tape a little bit. I see it on tape a little bit.
And I won't.
Okay, all right.
I can't. Antonio Brown, and you got to go back and watch the Antonio. I mean, this guy was just the 5 years before all of it went down and the trade to the Raiders and all that stuff. You could argue were the best 5 years of any receiver in the league. Like he was banana land.
Stuff.
And I just don't think you have that. I can't do it. You know, it's like when people comp to Megatron. You're like, just stay. You gotta stay off of it.
Yeah.
Maybe
okay,
maybe you can think it, but you can never say it out loud. I think that's where I'm at with it.
Let me say this. Maybe the reason why Antonio Brown at his side on paper worked so well in reality, maybe the same reason why Zay Flowers on paper works much better in reality. I think that his skills work in that way a little bit. Who is your comp for him?
I have floor. It's KJ Hamler. I think KJ Hamler is the floor. Like what he'll be at his worst, right? And I think at his best, I not at his best, but like the middle likely comp,
most
I have
average.
Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is where I went, and then
which is
the
a
high
good
end
player.
Probably exactly, and then T.Y. Hilton. That's why he's my wide receiver too. Like I had T.Y. Hilton up there at top.
This draft class is the best thing that's ever happened to T.Y. Hilton, like since his prime, because every single team is wanting their shrimp receiver from this class to be T.Y. Hilton. Yeah,
I think the reasons, and I'm going to go to my notes here. The reasons I like Zay Flowers is that there is this necessary dog that you have to have when you are that small to win these 50-50 balls and win in competitive, contested situations. And if you don't have that, I'm already putting you in a tier with other receivers that are your size. The other reason is I think he's a very fluid mover, smooth, and has the competitiveness over the middle of the field to survive hits. The worry is, and I've written about this, I've tweeted about this, sub 30-inch arms. There's only been one receiver in 10 years that has played outside receiver and had over 800 yards in a season that has under 30-inch arms at outside receiver, and that's Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson is a generational deep threat. Total outlier. Yep. I don't think Zay Flowers is into that tier. Other receivers that even come close to that all have over these 30-inch arms. I think that for me, even if he's a slot only in the league, right? Maybe you play him at outside receiver, but maybe more than 50-60% of his snaps are in the slot. That's where it starts to make sense that it could be like a Zay or a KJ Hamler type in the league, where you love what you see and you're so excited by this small, fast jitterbug, but it's so hard to stick him at outside receiver and see him beat press. Now, if he can figure it out, that's how you get to become Tyler Lockett. That's how you get to become a T.Y. Hilton, is you find a way with your size limitations, with your arm length limitations, to be physical enough and long and competitive enough to beat these guys out. Zay is awesome. The tape is phenomenal. For a team that is willing to say he could be a slot guy only in the league, that's the team you have to take him. But a team that's maybe pot committed to trying with outside receiver and that doesn't end up working out and they're slow to play him in the slot, that's where his development and the situation could lead to just underwhelming results on a pick that I think can work out played in the right spot.
All right, JT, let's hear the numbers on Zay Flowers from a measurement standpoint.
Zay Flowers is another short king in this NFL draft.
Short king spring, baby.
Coming in at I mean, short king. I shouldn't say that. He's 5'9".
So for the NFL. For the
NFL, yes. 5'9", 182. Both of those measurements come in the 8th percentile and the 10th percentile, respectively. Arm length is a big concern with him for 29 and a quarter arms. That's the second percentile.
I hate that Austin brought that number up because that statistic that he mentioned, it scares me. I love Zay Flowers, but that is scary, man.
Yep. His 40 time though is very good at a 4.42. That's 82nd percentile. So he's our number 2 in this class for both of us. And that's because we like his speed and his ability outside of his measurables.
It's the bounce, right? It's the juice. This guy is a wind-up toy. He's a spring waiting to explode. You can't teach the explosiveness that this guy has. It's that can't touch him in a phone booth type of ability, right? So that's an intangible and an unteachable thing. That is just something that he brings to the table that other guys don't. He knows when to avoid contact, which is one of the reasons why I think a comp that Austin mentioned and I think is an apt middle-of-the-road comp for him is
Tyler Lockett.
Thank you. I had Tyler Scott stuck on my head. Tyler Lockett out of Seattle. JT, I know I've shown you this, but go and look up Tyler Lockett after the catch compilations on YouTube. This dude is the master of not getting tackled. And that is something that, Zay Flowers is good at that as well. If he can keep that up at his size with his frame, get the ball, get the yards, and then get down. That's how you prolong a career. And he's very, very good at that, whether he's making you miss with his juice, with his burst, with his agility, or the fact that he just knows when to not take massive hits at his size and his top end speed. You got to account for it, right? Despite his levers being a little bit shorter, despite his overall size being on the smaller side, dude's got juice in the speed game. And at a 4.4, would you say a 4.42? What's his 40?
Yeah, 4.42.
4.42. He's got the kind of speed that you're looking for. I think that high end comp of T.Y. Hilton absolutely applies here from a statistical standpoint in college. Very consistent year to year. Grades in the mid 70s every single season. Played 11, 12, and 12 games. So very available. Knows how to not get killed out there. This past season, he caught 78 balls for 12 touchdowns, which was his best in his college career. 2.22 yards per route run, well above average. Contested catch rate. This is where he really gets me, JT. This guy, 58.3% contested catch rate, is in the elite category. His tape, I don't know if you've watched much of him, JT. The receiving prowess that he brings to the table, despite the quarterback talent he was working with is really impressive, because there were times that it felt like they were playing a game of jackpot out there. The quarterback was just chucking it up, and Zay's down there somewhere, and Zay is doing whatever it takes to get under the ball and to make the catch. The accuracy was a significant issue for him. So if he gets an NFL caliber quarterback throwing him the ball, I think his ceiling is even higher than we have seen in college. Got a bit of a drop issue. Okay. 10.3% drop rate. Now, same with Quentin Johnston. How much of that is him being thrown balls that are really hard to catch? A good bit of it. But he had 9 drops last year. And you look at some of the advanced metrics here. His grade versus man coverage, not great at his size. That's not all that. It is concerning, but it's not all that surprising, right? It's not surprising to see a guy of this size not really winning when he's being, especially in man press, like press man rather, on the line of scrimmage. He is being bumped, and the hand fighting, he's probably going to lose in those scenarios. That's what makes him more of a slot only guy in a lot of projections. I think he can place flanker. I think we saw at the combine, JT, it was very popular. This guy, the before and after pictures of when he was like 173 pounds and now he's 180 something. He's got rocked up this past year. Dude is much stronger, much bigger looking, like just the frame. It's holding a lot more muscle than I would have guessed if you just show me that first picture. And because of that, I think at this size, if you can maintain that for playing purposes, I think he can play flanker effectively in the NFL, but at the very least, he can be a menace in the slot. And I really like this guy. Yards after the catch, 6.4 yards, very good. Even better, missed tackles forced, 15. Again, this dude is just impossible to bring down. He's got a little bit of that, kind of that Jalin Waddle. I mentioned Antonio Brown with Austin, but he shot that down, so I won't go back there. Maybe a little bit of Tyreek Hill in the sense that he's just a jitterbug out there. He's just jittery, and he's hard to bring down once he's got the ball in his hands. So there's a lot of things to like about Zay Flowers. Austin, we got to get you out of here, but not before we talk about Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who is, according to most, the top receiver in this class. He's another guy who it's a lot of projection based on what we saw from him a year ago. And the last thing we saw from him when he was really healthy was he went thermonuclear in the Rose Bowl and put up, 17,000 yards on 16,000 catches. Yeah, the dude's incredible when he's incredible. Really, the only concern besides some size limitations is the fact that, he missed an entire year with a hamstring injury. Not the greatest way to start out, lead into your NFL career. But what are your thoughts on him?
For me, he is the guy that if we fast forward 5 years, we'll see has the most yards. That to me, I think he has, and like obviously you have the injury
just
this past year that
production
sitting out. Like, but if/when he's healthy enough to average 12 games played over the next 5 years, or even 13, 14 games played over the next 5 years, he is going to be the guy that is the most productive. I would bet a lot of money on that because he's a bucket getter at both areas of field. He can play inside and outside, and reliable hands, probably the smoothest hands in this class. Someone that I think you see comparisons to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's been awesome, obviously, for the Detroit Lions this past year. That's the kind of player you're getting in him. And that, in my opinion, when you look at money downs and you look at just chain movers, has a ton of value in this league. Is he the burner you need to field stretch and all that stuff? Maybe not. Is there a range of outcomes where he's Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson? Probably not. But could he be Amon-Ra St. Brown for your team, and then you add around him
that's the
Jalen Waddle types and all that stuff? I think so. And that, to me, is enough in this wide receiver class where there's 1,000 reasons to talk out of some of these guys. With Jaxon Smith-Njigba, you're going to have to fight me to talk me out of him because I'm there with him. I want him on my football team. If we don't have his skill set already, he can be a redundant skill set if you have a lot of, like, you already have your bucket hitter, you already have your Amon-Ra St. Brown, or even in the world where you already have your Justin Jefferson, who's getting a lot of the same routes that Jaxon Smith-Njigba would be getting. But most offenses don't have that guy. Most offenses, when they're on third down, they're looking for their star number one on the outside that's getting bracketed and double covered, and don't have this guy in the slot or don't have this number 2 type that can go get your first down. That, I think, for me, is why I really, really doubt Jaxon Smith-Njigba was on the board, after the top 20 picks. I think he's a legitimate, top 15 type of player.
All right. Last but not least, JT, let's hear the numbers on Jaxon Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State.
JSN comes in at 6 foot, 196 pounds with 30 and a half arm length. So kind of just like in the middle of this class, but his measurables are not why you're drafting him as the first wide receiver in this class.
Yeah, no, I agree. But there's a lot to love, obviously. We don't have to go into detail convincing folks to like this guy. His 91.7 PFF grade in 2021, monstrous, incredible, the best that we've seen of any of these guys. In that season, he had 95 receptions for 1,595 yards and 9 touchdowns. The biggest concern for me with him is, like we mentioned with Austin, he got a hamstring and missed a whole year. If you're a Titans fan looking for this guy to be drafted after the past couple of seasons the Titans have had, how eager are you thinking Rand Carthen and Mike Vrabel are to bring in a guy like this? Is maybe not all that eager, right? I'm not sure that that's the number one priority for them. But there's a lot to love from his technical savvy. Like, I think he's going to be like Austin mentioned, the most productive guy out of the gate. He is somebody that you can use in the slot, but I also think he can be an outside receiver. I think that he's got the technical prowess, the polish to be able to succeed at the outside, despite a little bit of size limitations, not enough to concern me all that much. Where he can improve, in my notes, I don't have a whole lot, right? It's just durability is a concern. But beyond that, when you hear Ryan Day, the coach of Ohio State, go on these podcasts and he's asked, like, hey, coach, you've had a lot of great receivers come through your program really recently. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the kid coming out next year, whose name I'm totally blanking. Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm like, who's his dad? Marvin Harrison Jr. Who's the best among them? He says Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think people can understand why. He's going to be a bona fide top 5 pick next year, right? But then he says the next best guy is Jackson Smith-Njigba. And when he puts him above these guys that we've seen just last year have really fantastic seasons, and Garrett Wilson in New York, Chris Olave in New Orleans, that's high praise. And I think that that's a great reason why Jackson Smith-Njigba is absolutely going to be a top 15, top 20 pick in this year's draft. No, I agree entirely. Austin, we thank you so much for your time, dude. It's been awesome. We'll have you back at some point in the future. Is there anything you need to plug? Anything people need to go check out of yours right now?
Go to theringer.com,
Yeah.
the Ringer YouTube channel, all of the podcasts that we do, the Ringer NFL show, the Ringer NFL draft show, working on all those things, and just continue to read the Ringer. And from here, continue to listen to this show. The show is awesome. Love you, Easton Freeze. Love you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Bingo. Awesome. Thank you, man. Appreciate your time. And we thank you for being on the show. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we appreciate Austin, of course, coming in and dropping some fantastic knowledge on us. He is the best. Again, go check out all of his work and all of the awesome work the guys at the Ringer are doing. Just a little tease, JT, we got another big-time Ringer guest coming on the show after the draft to sift through the rubble, evaluate where we are. Very excited to have him on. Another guy that we met a little bit more happenstance at the Combine. We met with Austin on purpose. We did not meet with this guy on purpose. Ended up sharing an Uber with him, and he was the coolest guy ever. You bought him a drink, and he still owes you for it. So I said, you got to come on the show. And he said, all right, he's going to come on the show. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to the rest of this week, JT. As we've mentioned on the show yesterday, we've got shows each and every day from here, yesterday on Monday, all the way through to draft night. And then we'll be doing our draft live shows with some special guests you want to tune into for that. We'll be back tomorrow with, we can officially say, tight ends for sure. No longer a question. The tight end episode with James Foster is happening tomorrow, and we're not putting it off because it's bad by any means. It's really fantastic. James brings a lot of awesome insight at a position that the Titans absolutely need a guy in this draft. There's a lot of folks that say, well, JT, Titans Tim is back for a second day in a row. And the Titans got Chikakonkwo, and they got that filler down from wait, I forget where the guy even came from. Was it
Chicago, I think?
Yeah, Chicago. They got their blocking tight end. They got their receiving tight end. They're set, brother. Get us a receiver. First of all,
well, I don't. Second of all, I don't even think Titan Tim could really pronounce Chikakonkwo's name. He would say something just outlandish. So that maybe is a little off.
Something borderline racist. Yeah, absolutely. Titan Tim would be saying something like that. But no, the Titans still need another guy. Now, do they need to spend a high pick on him? Maybe not. Maybe Darnell Washington, the dream might be dead. But they need another guy that can be a long-term answer like Chikakonkwo is, because they don't have necessarily another long-term answer at tight end besides Chig on the roster. There's some projection there, but you'd like another guy, and this class is just too good for them to not take one. So I think that's a really important episode you want to tune into tomorrow. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you tomorrow.